Part 14. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 131. Before this, Shiji also admired Orgrim very much, but more about Orgrim's potential and strength. The direct reason why he agreed to accept Orgrim as his disciple was because Orgrim saved his life. As for the previous kindness and so on, Shiji didn't take it seriously at all. In his opinion, those favors were given to Niemann, not to Orgrim. It was he who promised Niemann to take action first for Orgrim and others. The rest are taken into account, and people like Shiji, who are arrogant, don't take those things seriously. As for what Orgrim said, Shiji's kindness in taking care of Niemann for so long and so on. In Shiji's view, Niemann was his subordinate and had created value for him. He also liked her very much, so he took some care of her. This is his own business, and it is also the business of the flying pirates. Is Yoneman the sister of Orgrim or something? It doesn't matter at all, okay. Could it be that Niemann is not Orgrim's sister, so Shiki, won't take care of her? So Shiji didn't take it seriously. The reason why he was so happy to accept Orgrim as his disciple was very simple. First, Orgrim saved him once, and second, Orgrim had enough potential and qualifications. It's that simple. As for the heir and the like, Shiji didn't take it seriously before. He didn't think Orgrim could inherit anything from him or surpass him. It was unlikely anyway, because Shiji was very confident in himself. The only one he could see was Roger, and the rest were just trash. But this time today, Shiji did change his opinion of Orgrim, and he vaguely felt that maybe this kid, is it really not a bad idea to train him as his heir? At this moment, besides admiring Orgrim, Shiji also felt a little more fond of him. Good job, Shiji reached out and patted Orgrim on the shoulder. Orgrim turned his head and glanced at Shiji, and found that there seemed to be something inexplicable in this guy's eyes. Tenderness. This scared Orgrim all over. He was so smart that he even got goosebumps. You old guy, do you have any special quirks? Before Orgrim could come to his senses, Shiki said with a little emotion, this plan is really good, but it will take a long time. Indigo smiled at the side and said, I am going to invite Dr. Nightingale to join this project recently. As one of the top doctors in the world, he has very good skills and ideas. Maybe it can speed up our expected progress. At this point, Indigo looked at Orgrim and asked, what do you think, young master? Indigo is different from ordinary cotters. He has no strength, but he does the person Shiji relies on the most. Indigo, on the other hand, disdains the company of ordinary cotters. He considers himself Shiji's retainer, and Shiji indeed treats him this way. Orgrim is now Shiki's only disciple and heir apparent. I don't know if Shiji has a functional problem or what, but he doesn't have any children. Therefore, in Indigo's view, Orgrim is Shiji's most orthodox successor. So he likes to call Orgrim Little Master. But when Orgrim heard this gay name, he felt sick all over. He couldn't help but said, really, Brother Indigo, don't call me that. Brother Indigo was stunned for a moment, and then said, what about the young master? As the successor of Boss Shiji, you can bear this responsibility. Give him this title. When Orgrim heard this title, he immediately thought of Doflamingo, who should still be in the North Sea at this time. This damn, the title I used to tease him, now I want to put it above my head. On it? Impossible. No, I have a friend, and I like to tease him as young master. Let's forget about this name. Orgrim waved his hand again and said. Indigo was also a little embarrassed at this time. Damn, you don't agree with anything. What should I call you? Okay, don't worry about these details. If he doesn't like it, just call him Orgrim. Shiji waved his hand and said. Well, that's right, just call me Orgrim. Orgrim nodded. Indigo hesitated for a moment. He thought, how about he imitates the people in the Warhammer Pirates and calls him Master Hammer? But this name will make Boss Shiji. Where was it placed? You can't call Boss Shiji Master in the future, right? In the end, Indigo shook his head and said helplessly, okay, Lord Orgrim. Orgrim breathed a sigh of relief this time, and then said, Nightingale, if he doesn't have any objections, then so be it. After all, we are all under Boss Shiji now. Hearing this, Shiji smiled slightly and said, you kid finally put me in a right position for once. Then he looked at Indigo again and said, since you think it makes sense, just let Nightingale cooperate. I've mentioned it to Dr. Nightingale and he's interested. Indigo responded with a smile. As for this big plan, Shiji has no plans to let Orgrim participate now. And to be honest, Orgrim has nothing to participate in such a plan. What can he do? Do you expect a muscular man like him to engage in scientific research? Therefore, Shiji quickly changed the subject, looked at Orgrim and asked, have you gained anything in the past few days? Have you finished reading the things I asked you to watch? Orgrim shook his head and said, I haven't finished reading it yet, but I still gained a lot thanks to Boss Shiji for your insights. Well, if you don't understand anything, just ask me and I will answer it for you. Shiji nodded and said, ah, by the way, I felt that I was far behind in physical skills before. Boss Shiji, you think so too, so are there any secret techniques for practicing physical skills that are suitable for me? Orgrim thought for a while and asked. Shiji touched his chin and then said, I have collected a lot of things and put them all in the library. This kind of physical training mainly depends on the individual interests. In fact, no one knows your physical fitness better than yourself. When the time comes, go take a look and choose one yourself. Shiji himself is not particularly accomplished in physical skills. His main strength lies in the three aspects of domineering, swordsmanship, and the development of fruit abilities. He has dabbled in the rest, but that's all. Okay, I see. Orgrim nodded and said. He didn't expect Shiji to be an all-rounder and be able to advise him on everything. As long as he has the resources, I can choose it myself. I see you just came in. You seem to have something to say to me. Is there a problem? Shiji asked again. When Orgrim heard this, an evil smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he said, that's it? It seems that many people are worried about me becoming Boss Shiji's disciple, and this so-called the successor feels very unconvinced. I think I should give them a good explanation and communicate with them, so I want to say hello to you, Boss Shiji. How could Shiji not understand what Orgrim meant? He glanced at Orgrim thoughtfully, and then said, we pirates, in the end, it depends on our strength. What do you want to do? Just do it, but after all, you are one of your own, so you have to save some effort. Also, don't ruin my reputation. There are some powerful guys among my subordinates. Although Shiki's subordinates are not as elite as the Roger pirates, such as Hades Shilbaz Rayleigh and Jabba Sparks, they are not as elite as the Whitebeard pirates currently have. Mal. It's worse than Ko, Jose, and the like. But in general, Shiji is still a bit unsatisfactory in this regard. Among his subordinates, the strongest are indeed strong, and there are many who fish in troubled waters. And he doesn't Newgate cares about his crew like that, but Shiji cares about only a few, such as Neiman and Indigo. The rest, in Shiji's opinion, can be supplemented at any time. Ah, of course, now there are three more people, Orgrim, Mihawk, and Beckman. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 132. When Orgrim left the hall, he asked Neiman to call those who were not convinced by him and prepare to have in-depth discussions with them. At the same time, at Marine Headquarters Marineford, some of the Navy's big bosses were also discussing matters regarding Shiki and Orgrim. The Warring States General has been in a bad mood since he almost caught Shiji last time and was disturbed by Orgrim. At this time, He also had a serious face and was talking about something. During this time, our intelligence department has made some inquiries. There is no whereabouts of the Warhammer pirates on the islands near Adwal, the Warring States General spoke softly. Chief Staff Officer Ahe sighed slightly, and then said there is no whereabouts report, which means one thing. There is a great possibility that Khazgarot Orgrim has led the Warhammer pirates to join. We have arrived under the Golden Lion. The expressions of the other Navy bosses were not surprising after hearing the inference of Chief Staff Ahe. After all, they had also deduced this matter. Before that, they had unanimously concluded that there was a high possibility that Khazgarot Orgrim would join the Golden Lion after entering the New World. Now, this possibility has almost become a reality. Of course, although it's not surprising, the mood is definitely unpleasant. That guy was already very difficult to deal with, but now he's mixed up with Shiji. With Shiji's character, it's not hard to imagine that he will take great care of that Orgrim guy. Maybe if we meet again in the future, it will be even more difficult to deal with, General Zifa said softly. The others nodded, thinking that what he said made sense. There is no doubt that Khazgarot Orgrim is a very talented person, otherwise, it would not be possible. When he was born in Noriko, both Jun and Kuzan were beaten to the ground. It was even more impossible to get the approval of that guy Darag. But now, this guy who was born in Noriko has found his new starting point, and he joined under the banner of Shiji. It is conceivable that ambitious people like Shiji will never bury the talent of Orgrim. Especially there are thousands of connections between Orgrim and Shiji. Shiki's subordinates include Orgrim's sister. Shiki saved Orgrim in the Shampoo Islands. Orgrim rescued Shiki in the waters of Edwall. What do you think, Shiki? Jiju will not treat Orgrim badly. In this way, Orgrim, who was born in the wild and has such great abilities, will receive Shiji's resources, and his progress will be beyond imagination. His talent will also explode further. Perhaps given time, he will become another top master on the sea. But unfortunately, this kind of master is destined to be the righteous enemy of their navy, and is destined to stand against the evil pirates. In the camp. It's no wonder that these big guys in the navy are in a happy mood. We are also responsible for this kind of thing at the source. When Orgrim was still in Bihai, he was considered a righteous man. In theory, he was a member of the world government. He was Orgrim in Bihai. Everyone must know how the town's defense officer ended up on the path of becoming a pirate. Garp snorted coldly. Orgrim and Beckman have long wanted to become pirates, but this is what they have in mind. The big guys in the navy don't know. And from Orgrim's various judging from various information, when he was a garrison officer, although he was a little out of line, he still did a very good job in his obligation to protect the town. He repelled pirates many times and protected the safety of the town. Until, almost a year ago, that bastard naval colonel from North Sea Branch 103 wanted to bully Orgrim and others and usurp their due benefits. In the end, Orgrim was forced from a righteous man to a pirate who attacked the navy. What the hell? If Orgrim isn't that powerful, then forget it. But now Orgrim is about to go to heaven, and the navy feels angry when they think of this matter. Theoretically speaking, it was entirely possible for talents like Orgrim to be recruited by the navy and join the navy. After all, he was a garrison officer. When the navy recruits people, they will mostly prefer people like this who have certain experience. If there hadn't been such nonsense, Orgrim might have been drafted into the navy during a certain conscription. With his talent, if he just tempers it, he will be recommended to the navy headquarters. By then, with the resources of the navy to train him, so many big bosses in the navy headquarters will not bury him. Judging from his current achievements, if he had been in the navy, he might have become an excellent rear admiral or even a vice admiral by now. In the future, it is even possible to become a navy admiral candidate, or a real navy admiral. Such an outstanding seedling was pushed into the pirate camp by their navy for a mere 29 million baileys. What the hell? The more I think about it, the angrier I get. It is a top priority to rectify the affairs of the four navies, clean up military discipline, and strictly investigate each branch. We must prevent this kind of thing from happening again in the future, the Warring States General said in a deep voice. Let's start from behind, General Sci-fi said lightly. At this time, Doflamingo, who was far away in the North Sea and doing business smoothly, had no idea that because of Orgrim's deeds, the Navy would start to strictly investigate all the various locations in the North Sea. The situation in the branch has caused his business to decline a lot for a long time in the future. It also gave Doflamingo some ideas about transformation. Why not become a pirate or something? Now that Orgrim has entered the New World, and is likely to join Shiji's banner, we no longer need to control him. Let's increase the bounty. Lieutenant General Garp thought for a while and then said. Increasing bounties is also a common method used by the Navy to deal with pirates. On the surface, it increases the allure of pirates and allows many capable guys to go and covet their bounty, and you might get an unexpected surprise one day. For example, a certain private expert lost all his gambling money today and has no gambling capital. When he went out, he happened to meet a pirate with a high bounty, so he cleaned up, then went to the Navy base to change into a bailee, and went back to continue gambling or something. But on a deeper level, the Navy was instigating the comparison mood among the pirates and provoking their hostile relationship. In the pirate camp, there are many people who are arrogant. They are not convinced that others have higher bounties than their own, and then go to find trouble with them. Bounties can incite internal fighting among pirates to a certain extent. This the Navy also likes to see it. There is no need to hide anything about the Shampoo Islands and the capital of the Seven Waters before. As for the Battle of Adver, let's focus on Orgrim and others. General Sci-fi thought for a while and said. This can be regarded as a kind of flattery, a common technique of the Navy. General Warring States nodded and said, how much is the appropriate bounty? Consultant Ahe picked up Orgrim's current bounty order, which was marked with 32 million belly. She looked at the reward order, thought about it, and said 900 million belly. How? The Warring States General and others were stunned for a moment, not because it was too low, but because it was too high. Now Shiji and other big guys have bounties of only 2 to 3 billion, and Orgrim has been fully prepared to go to sea, and it has not been a year. Give him a reward of 900 million belly. Just when many big guys were surprised, there was a knock on the door of General Sengoku's office. Sengoku responded, and then a naval colonel walked in and said hurriedly, report, Warring States General, we have the latest news about Husgarot Orgrim. Explain, the Warring States General said without hesitation. It has been confirmed that Husgarot Orgrim and the Warhammer pirates have joined the Golden Lion Shiki's banner, and according to reliable sources, Husgarot Orgrim has been acquired by the Golden Lion Shiki. He is the only disciple and heir, the naval colonel said quickly. In fact, neither Shiji nor Orgrim did anything to keep this kind of matter secret, and their subordinates just talked about it. Even if the news spread, it would be very serious. Normal. Warring States and others were all confused. You are a pirate, what kind of heir do you want? Do you think you are the king? But this does not affect the importance they attach to this matter. There is no doubt that all the conjectures just made, have all become a reality, and Shiji is far more partial to that bastard Orgrim than they imagined. Lion disciples, Garp murmured softly, his expression a little uncertain. 900 million, just 900 million, the Warring States General also murmured with some emotion. The Lion Disciple, worth the price. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 133. After being silent for a period of time, things about the adversary finally swept across the sea. The news of the world, with the cooperation of the Navy, made it all public. For a time, everyone on the sea knew what happened in the Adver waters. Shiki suffered a big defeat there. He didn't lose to Roger, he didn't lose to the Navy, but he lost to the storm. I really don't know when to say yes. Life. In this incident, Kajgro Orgrim, who turned the tide, also appeared on the cover of the newspaper. In a certain sea area of the New World, on the ship of the Roger pirates. At this time, Roger was looking at the newspaper in his hand, as a participant in the Battle of Adwal. He was also very curious about what would happen next. For such a long time, the Navy did not announce the final situation there, which made Roger itchy. At the same time, he also felt that Shiji might have gotten lucky and escaped. After all, if the Navy really caught people like Shiji, it would not have been silent for so long. It must have made this matter public on the second day of the Battle of Adwal, making it known to everyone. Just fine. They will even take advantage of the power of this victory to sweep the New World again and join the struggle for hegemony in the New World. But before, there was no movement from the Navy, nor did it enter the New World again. Therefore, Roger concluded that Shiji must have run away, and the Navy had basically gained nothing. He was very curious about how Shiji ran away. Now, I finally know the answer. Disciple of the lion Hosgarot Orgrim, with a bounty of 900 million belly, this guy has really skyrocketed, Roger murmured with some emotion. Sure enough, he still joined Shiji's side. Sparky Jabba smacked his lips and said. As a man who drank with Orgrim in the capital of Seven Waters, Jabba of course also heard Orgrim's unabashed words, that is, he wanted to join Shiji's banner or something. Now it seems that the man did it and became Shiji's disciple. There is no doubt that Orgrim will grow rapidly, there will be a place for him on the sea in the future, but it's a pity that I may not be able to see it. It must be very interesting to fight against a hero like him, right? Roger said with some regret. Maybe his growth rate will exceed your imagination, and you may not have the chance to fight against him in the future. Jabba said. On the other side, Rayleigh also held a newspaper in his hand and said with some emotion, look, on the Shamboard Islands, he fought against Sengoku and Zifa, and it was Shiki and Kaido who showed up. By disrupting the Navy's arrangement, Shiki saved that guy's life. And now, in the Battle of Adwal, he saved Shiki's life again. Really, I don't know what to say. I didn't expect that that guy was also in Adwal at the time, Roger smiled and said. Sitting behind Rayleigh, Shanks looked at the news in the newspaper with some curiosity and asked Captain Roger, is this guy very powerful? The bounty is 900 million belly, will it be too high? Ah ha 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 ha, Roger laughed first, and then said, not tall at all, that guy, sooner or later it will surprise the world, I have a feeling. Yeah? He's really awesome. When can I be like him? Shanks smacked his lips with emotion. You boy, you are still a trainee crew member now. You are far worse than him, but you should work hard. Who can say for sure about the future? Rayleigh patted Shanks on the head and said with a smile. At the same time, on Kaido's ship, Kaido was also drunk at this time, holding this newspaper in his hand. His mood was very complicated, not after a while, tears started to flow down. Wow wow wow, Kaido suddenly burst into tears. Why? Why? Orgrim, you chose that bastard Shisaki, I also saved you on the Shamboard Islands, okay, Kaido murmured in pain. Some of his fellow pirates were panicking when they saw Kaido, the big boss, crying bitterly, for fear that Kaido would suddenly become drunk and crazy. Hateful. It's obvious that I fell in love with you first, Kaido cursed unwillingly. Woo woo woo, damn it, when I kill that bastard Shiki one day, I will definitely let you join me. After Kaido vented his anger, he covered his eyes and cried bitterly. It's a good thing that Orgrim wasn't here, otherwise he would have been very surprised. When did I have such an important position in Kaido's heart? Why do you still think so? Are you crying? I can only say that Kaido is really passionate about Orgrim. Totlan Wangwo, Cake Island, Big Mom Charlotte Lingling is also reading this newspaper. Damn it, Shiki, that loser, didn't kill that despicable thief Roger, Charlotte Lingling cursed angrily. While cursing, Charlotte Lingling looked at the newspaper again, Orgrim carrying a sledgehammer, and then smacked her lips and said, Lion Disciple, the sole heir. Seems interesting. Then, Charlotte Lingling raised her head, looked at Katakuri who was standing not far away, and asked Katakuri, what do you think? Katakuri heard this and said softly, Mom, we have not paid much attention to this Orgrim before, but judging from his deeds, he has defeated Kuzan of the Navy, and has also escaped many times from warring states, Garp, Zifa and others. From his 10 judging from the age of 7, which is less than 18 years old, there is no doubt that, he has very good talent and potential, and also has considerable strength. Katakuri actually said this with some restraint. After seeing Orgrim's 900 million bounty, his mentality collapsed. I am the general of the Big Mom pirates, and the bounty is only 700 million Baileys, less than a year after Orgrim went to sea, it was already 900 million? If we marry him, when old Shiji dies one day, wouldn't we be able to directly take Shiji's power under our control? After all, what kind of heir is he? Charlotte Lingling fantasized. Katakuri was stunned for a moment. Damn it, are you trying to find me a stepfather again? Mom, this, inappropriate, Katakuri said with some embarrassment. Charlotte Lingling didn't think much, touched her chin and said in terms of age, I am indeed a little behind him, but my talent is very good. If she is as good as if he gives birth to a child, he will definitely be very powerful, right? Katakuri's eyelids couldn't help but twitch, but before he could speak, Charlotte Lingling shook her head again. Shiji would definitely not agree. That dead lion is so arrogant, I don't want to belittle him either, Charlotte Lingling said to herself. If she and Orgrim got together, wouldn't they become Shiji's juniors? Is this really possible? But Smoothie and the others might be good, right? Charlotte Lingling started thinking about it again. Katakuri was slightly relieved when he saw this. It doesn't matter if he finds a brother-in-law or something, as long as he doesn't keep looking for a stepfather for me. It's just that he felt, this is all my mother's fantasy. Whether Orgrim can take a liking to our Big Mom pirates is still a question. This is not Katakuri's self-deprecation. In fact, as of now, Shiki is the one. First class, the Big Mom pirates are second-rate. Shiji's disciples, can they like us, second-rate people? Huh, I thought that Shiji, that bastard, would lose a lot of power if he failed once, but I didn't expect that. Well, Charlotte Lingling broke away from her fantasy and sighed helplessly. Katakuri was thinking, who is more powerful compared with herself and Orgrim? Think about it for a while. After a while, Katakuri thought, it should be him, right? After all, he is almost 30 years old, has good talents, and has rich experience. If you only look at the bounty, it doesn't mean anything, right? But think about it carefully. Come to think of it, there are some extremely talented people in this world. What if this guy is Orgrim? Thinking of this, Katakuri was a little unsure, and secretly decided to practice harder. If he met Orgrim in the future, he couldn't lose to him. Katakuri was stunned for a moment, and then whispered softly, it's so strange, we have never met, but I feel pressure. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 134. New World, on board the Whitebeard pirates. At this time, the big boss Newgate was also holding a newspaper in his hand. He frowned slightly and was thinking about something. Ziobeji, what's wrong, Kojiki Odin walked up to Newgate with some curiosity and asked. Some time ago, Whitebeard and the others disappeared from the sight of the world. In fact, they went to the isolated country of Wano. There, Newgate met this guy Kojiki Odin, and Kojiki Odin also wanted to go to sea very much. After some tests and the like, Kojiki Odin successfully boarded the ship of the Whitebeard pirates, and also found a wife along the way. Kojiki Odin was very powerful, and Newgate did not adopt him as a son, but became a brother-like existence. Newgate called Odin his younger brother, and this guy Odin called Newgate Little Baiji. It can be regarded as a strange existence among the Whitebeard pirates. Odin? Newgate murmured first, and then said some time ago, something interesting happened on the sea. That guy Roger had a fight with Shiji. Roger is the powerful person you often mention, right? Shiki, it seems very powerful, Odin asked curiously. Well, they are all great, Newgate nodded. At this moment, Marco stuck his head out from behind Newgate, read the newspaper and said, Dad, it seems that Shiji has another powerful guy. This guy seems to be serious this time, lion disciple? I didn't expect this to happen. Newgate nodded. Newgate and Shiji have also been friends for a long time. Although they often have some minor frictions, both parties are very restrained. Generally speaking, the relationship is not particularly tense. Occasionally, if they meet at sea, maybe they will have a drink together. Because they have a good relationship, Newgate knows the character of Shiji very well. He is arrogant and unruly, and he doesn't look down on anyone who is idle. And such a guy now actually has a disciple, and he regards this disciple as some kind of successor, which makes Newgate very strange. Has this guy Shiji changed his gender, or is this lion disciple Hosgarot Orgrim really good? Newgate took another deep look at the picture of Orgrim in the newspaper, and finally remembered this character in his heart. Melview, in a wide square at this time, Orgrim was sitting on a stone pier, with supporters on his side standing next to him. For example, Beckman, Mihawk, Neiman, Katarina de Pen, and Sphinx. 3 days have passed since Orgrim asked Neiman to send a message to Shiji's guys. Today is the day Orgrim made an appointment with them to exchange and discuss with each other. At this time, Orgrim was sitting in the square waiting for those people to come over. In an attic not too far from the square, Shiji is also chewing a cigar and looking over here. Admiral, is this really okay? Dr. Indigo stood next to Shiji and asked. What is the problem? Makes sense. Shiji said calmly. Will it affect unity? What's the problem? Indigo hesitated for a moment and asked. After Shiji heard Indigo's inquiry, he laughed and said, Gee ha 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 ha, unity, Indigo, what do you think we are? There has never been such a thing as unity among my men. We are pirates. The strong rules the weak. Might is the truth. This is what we should believe in, unity. This is something only those hypocritical guys in the Navy would use. As he spoke, Shiji set his sights on the horizon further away and said softly, in this sea, the strong will live and the weak will die, without exception. After a pause, Shiji smiled again and said, but we are not enemies anyway. Just teach them a lesson and distinguish the strong from the weak. There is no need to make it a matter of life and death. Shiji said here, and on the other side, changes occurred in the square. A tall and strong man with long golden hair, who looked very mighty, also walked from the other side with a group of pirate cotters. Opposite Orgrim and others. There are not many cotters in Shiji's regiment, but there are quite a few independent captains under his banner. Those captains are not interested in Shiji's successor or not. Regarding these overt and secret struggles, they are also not participating. In most cases, without Shiji's call, they will spend their time outside. Those who came today are all cotters of Shiji's regiment. Among them, the man with long blonde hair has a bounty of 970 million won Bailey. Before Orgrim appeared, he considered himself Shiji's right-hand man, even his successor or something like that. It can be seen that he admires Shiji very much, and he wants to learn his style from Shiji. Even his name has something to do with lions. This man is called the Bloodhand Lion Rengar. Rengar stood not far from Orgrim and did not speak to Orgrim. He said something, looking a little proud and reserved. Orgrim had a cigar in his mouth and looked at the people opposite him with interest. It was obvious that anyone who dared to jump out and fight against him, Orgrim, should there are only so many of them. They may be regarded as another circle of Shiji's men. As for the rest of the guys, they are probably neutrals and just outsiders. Orgrim was not surprised by this and asked directly, "Is everyone here?" Rengar did not speak. A strong man with a ferocious face next to him held a machete in his hand and walked 2 steps forward. "Orgrim, I don't know what kind of ecstasy you poured into Boss Shiji. But you thought it would be easy, but you were wrong. Today I will teach you a lesson, and let Boss Shiji see clearly your true worth." This guy looked ferocious, but he seemed to be very cunning. As soon as he finished speaking, regardless of whether Orgrim responded or not, he directly drew the knife and slashed at Orgrim's head. Orgrim he had no intention of moving at all, and calmly exhaled a puff of smoke. Just when the machete was about to fall on Orgrim's head, Niemann, who was standing next to Orgrim, stretched out her hand. The armed color was domineering, and he grabbed it directly on the blade. "My elder brother has no interest in talking nonsense like you," Niemann said arrogantly. Then, her arm muscles surged, and she squeezed the blade hard with her palm. Before the fierce and strong man could react, Niemann's strong figure had already arrived. In front of him, he suddenly reached out and grabbed his head. With a huge force in his hand, it was like smashing a watermelon. He pressed his head with one hand and hit it towards the ground. Niemann did not attack with all his strength, otherwise this head was really going to turn into a watermelon and explode. Just one head hit him and he was so bloody that Niemann just threw this unlucky guy back like trash. Rengar looked at this person who was thrown away. The guy at his feet had no change in his expression. This time, he looked up at Orgrim and said, "Do you like hiding behind women?" Orgrim. A smile appeared on the corner of Orgrim's mouth and he said, "Don't come out and embarrass yourself, you guys. I'm not interested in you wastes either. You are their leader here, right? That should be your strongest one." "He is the leader of all of you," Rengar sneered. Orgrim smiled when he heard this, stood up, waved to Beckman and others, "Stand back a little, the blood will be splashed on you later, which will affect our drinking at night." Rengar's eyes became a little colder, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he waved his hand to signal the henchmen around him to move away. Soon, only Ogre stood in the huge square. Mew and Rengar were separated. Rengar looked at Orgrim's appearance, frowned slightly and said, "Where is your war hammer? Do you still use a war hammer to deal with you?" Orgrim waved his hand very casually and said, "Yeah. I hope you don't regret it," Rengar said coldly. As soon as the words fell, the atmosphere between the two became silent, and at the same time, their momentum was released. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 135. The momentum of the two gradually increased, and Orgrim's black hair also surged with the wind. Looking carefully, the Rengar opposite is actually quite handsome. He has a resolute face and long golden hair. He does look a bit like a handsome lion. I don't know what happened to this guy in the end. Anyway, in Orgrim's impression, there should be no such person. He probably died somewhere later, right? Speaking of which, Shiji didn't care much about most of his subordinates. In Orgrim's view, Shiji regards them as tool men. As long as he, Shiji, does not fall, these guys can be recruited again at any time, no matter how many of them die. While Orgrim was thinking about these things, Rengar seemed to notice that Orgrim's mind was a little distracted. With a flash of light in his eyes, he exerted force on his feet and rushed towards Orgrim. His stature is also tall, but compared to Orgrim, he is still a little shorter, only about 2 meters tall. This guy's explosive power seemed to be very strong and his speed was very fast. As he ran, the nails on his hands gradually became sharper and covered with a layer of dark-armed domineering force. The reason why Rengar is called the Blood-Hand Lion is because his hands are very powerful. When fighting with his opponents, he often disembowels them and makes his hands bloody. Over time, he has developed such a strategy. A cruel name. Drink. Rengar grabbed Orgrim's chest with a claw, as if he wanted to tear apart Orgrim's chest muscles. A smile appeared on the corner of Orgrim's mouth, and he grabbed it with both hands very accurately. Rengar's 2 hands then kicked towards Rengar's lower body. Rengar seemed to have a lot of fighting experience. When Orgrim grabbed his hands, he did not try to wrestle them. He also raised his leg and kicked Orgrim. In an instant, the kicks of the 2 people staggered on the lower body and collided with each other at the same time. The armed and domineering confrontation briefly broke out. Rengar twisted his hands. Also grabbed Orgrim's wrist with his backhand. However, before he could make any move, Orgrim took advantage of his height advantage and hit Rengar's head with a headbutt. Boom! There was a muffled sound, Rengar's eyes were a little red, and his head was pressed against Orgrim's head, and they were in a stalemate. At the same time, Rengar's body shape also underwent some changes. Golden hair grew on his feet, his already strong body became stronger, and animalistic lines appeared on his face. There is no doubt that this guy is an animal-type devil fruit user. Because of this sudden change in body shape, his height immediately grew taller, and he suddenly missed Orgrim's head. Then, sharp fangs sprouted from his mouth, and he swung towards Orgrim's head. He bit Orgrim on the neck. Orgrim didn't panic or anything. He seemed to have expected this. The moment this guy bit him, not only did he not retreat, but he thrust his shoulders forward and missed his attack at an extremely fast speed. With a bloody mouth, he put his shoulder on Rengar's neck and held him up. At the same time, an impact force erupted from Orgrim's arm, which directly knocked Rengar's claws away and hugged the guy's waist. With a force in his hand, Orgrim directly lifted this guy on his shoulders. Just as Rengar was about to struggle, Orgrim's center of gravity lowered again, catching him off guard. Brutal collision, Orgrim shouted in a low voice. At the same time, his feet began to exert force, and a shockwave erupted, directly pushing against Rengar and running behind him. Rengar directly caught Ogre with a claw. A trail of blood appeared in Mew's muscles. Before he could continue his counter-attack, Orgrim lowered his waist again. This time, Rengar was directly pressed to the ground by Orgrim's waist. On the ground, he felt a sharp pain, and Orgrim pushed him to the ground and rubbed him a lot. Suffering from the pain, Rengar struggled with his elevated legs, and finally stepped on them. It hit Orgrim's lower abdomen, and with a sudden force, Orgrim flew out. Orgrim took 2 steps back, with a ferocious smile on his lips, and patted himself casually. He looked unconcerned about the bloodstains he had been caught with. Rengar also looked at Orgrim strangely. He felt that the bastard in front of him seemed to be teasing him. His powerful impact fruit ability was not shown at all. Okay. What does this mean? In fact, Orgrim is indeed testing something, or pondering something. He wants to integrate and understand the things he has learned recently. But the testing just now, it made Orgrim feel that he was still far behind, and he didn't understand where to start. Forget it, let's stop messing around. Let's teach Rengar a lesson first and let's talk about the rest later. After Orgrim thought about it, he felt that he still hadn't accumulated enough. Thinking of this, the slightly impetuous aura on Orgrim's body completely dissipated. He suddenly squeezed his hands into fists, and at the same time, the dark arm domination spread to the forearms, and his eyes became serious. That's right, This is why hunting is necessary. Rengar didn't know what Orgrim was doing just now, but he knew that Orgrim was a little more serious now. A series of low roars came from Rengar's throat involuntarily, and then his half-animal figure changed again. His long golden hair fluttered in the wind, his whole head turned into a lion's head, the muscles of his arms bulged, and all his skin was covered with light down. He at this time, his height has completely surpassed Orgrim, and he is probably about a head taller than Orgrim. Animal Department cat fruit lion form. Orgrim murmured softly with a smile on his lips. As soon as he finished speaking, Rengar roared violently, and a wave of sound erupted from his mouth, scattering gravel and dust on the surrounding ground. They all flew out. In the next moment, his figure rushed towards Orgrim at an extremely fast speed, with a vague smell of blood on his claws. Orgrim didn't show any signs of it either. In order to avoid it, the impact force under his feet suddenly exploded, and the figure also rushed towards Rengar head-on. Lion blood claw, Rengar grabbed Orgrim's chest with a claw. Orgrim did not dodge, and a trail of blood was directly brought up in the air. However, the next second, Orgrim's arm was raised. Suddenly he hung it around Rengar's neck. Thunder plow hot knife, Orgrim shouted in a low voice. A powerful impact force erupted directly from his elbow. This force hung around Rengar's neck and directly lifted him up from the ground. Rengar felt a sharp pain in his neck, and his body was a little weightless. He expected that he would be blown away by this force, and the tail behind him was swaying in the air, as if trying to reverse his balance. But the next thing in an instant, Orgrim's other hand came directly from under him and placed it on his waist. Bad, Rengar hadn't finished speaking yet. Orgrim's palm on his waist exploded with impact again, sending him flying high into the sky. At the same time, Orgrim put his hands directly on everything, and an inexplicable energy condensed on his palms. Impact-type vitality cannon. Orgrim chuckled softly. The transparent energy in his palm was quickly condensed into a ball. In a moment, it turned into the size of an ordinary cannonball. Before the others could see clearly, this transparent energy, the cannonball, was blown away by Orgrim. It directly hit Rengar's body in the air. The next second, the transparent ball with a strong impact seemed to expand, and then exploded directly in the air. Set off a powerful impact. Rengar's figure that had started to fall was blown high into the sky again by this impact, and a stream of blood could not help but flow out from the corner of his mouth. The boss who said that he will definitely do it next time. Hey guys, hurry up and hand over all your monthly flower ticket reviews. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 136. The next moment, a shock wave exploded under Orgrim's feet, and he flew directly into the air, catching up with Rengar very quickly. Without giving Rengar time to react, Orgrim punched down from a high position and hit Rengar's chest directly. Rengar's arms were also wrapped in armed domineering energy. He crossed them in front of his chest and withstood Orgrim's fist very accurately. Punch cannon, Orgrim shouted in a low voice. A shock wave erupted directly from his fist, and the powerful impact forced Rengar to fall from the air. In just a moment, the two of them landed on the ground again. On the ground, Rengar fell on his back, and the powerful impact penetrated him directly. His whole body was punched into the ground by Orgrim. The thick stone floor tiles in the square were all shattered. Come. Rengar screamed in pain and spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes became increasingly scarlet, and the expression on his face became more ferocious. Orgrim ignored this and raised his fist, ready to hit him again, but Rengar was not so easy to bully. His tail suddenly curled up and wrapped directly around Orgrim's ankle. Then he tugged hard and staggered Orgrim. His next punch failed to hit Rengar's chest. Instead, it hit the heavy ground. Seizing this opportunity, Rengar inserted his claw into Orgrim's waist and abdomen, sinking one knuckle into it. Orgrim also felt a stinging pain, and before he could react, there was another tearing pain. Rengar was seen tearing out a piece of muscle from Orgrim's waist and abdomen. Orgrim endured the severe pain, raised his hand and punched Rengar again, hoping to blow Rengar's head off. However, Rengar couldn't dodge this punch. After all, he was pressed to the ground, but he seemed to be vicious and bit Orgrim's arm fiercely. Orgrim's forearm was directly stuck in his mouth. His armed color was domineering and he broke one of Rengar's sharp teeth in an instant. But Rengar shook his head suddenly, as if he wanted to throw Orgrim away. However, Orgrim was extremely powerful and managed to stabilize his figure. Rengar's speed was still not slow. The moment he found that he couldn't get rid of Orgrim, he changed his strategy. With Orgrim's resistance, the figure was pulled out from the ground and stood up again. Without any entanglement, he immediately let go of his mouth and took 2 steps back. Orgrim did not attack again this time. He punched his fists in front of his chest and said with a cruel smile, "How is it? Is my fist strong enough?" Rengar's eyes were scarlet, he shook the muscle torn from Orgrim's waist in his hand, and asked without any sign of weakness, "You're not much better, are you? Don't forget, I'm an animal type." At the same time as he finished speaking, Rengar threw the flesh and blood in his hand into the air, and then bit it fiercely, swallowing Orgrim's flesh and blood into his belly like a wild beast. Orgrim was really shocked now. "Damn it, do you have such a strong taste?" But soon, he discovered that something was wrong. At this time, Rengar's eyes completely lost their pupils and turned into a scarlet color. At the same time, his body became a little stronger again. In the muscles of the body, the meridians bulge out. "Roar!" Rengar roared at Orgrim Lion. "It's wild collapse." Niemann, who was standing in the distance watching the battle, quickly said. "What is that?" Beckman asked in surprise. "It's Rengar's autonomous rage. The more injured he is, the more violent he becomes. I don't know when he mastered a skill, which is to devour the flesh and blood of his opponent. This will make him extremely stimulated and enter the realm. In an explosive state of overload, the whole person transformed into a beast that only knows killing and knows no pain." Niemann explained with a very serious expression. "That guy once massacred an entire naval base in the state and killed 2 vice admirals," Sphinx also said in a low voice with seriousness in her eyes. Under normal circumstances, Sphinx felt that she was crazy enough, but even she knew how violent and crazy Rengar's wild collapse was. Orgrim didn't know the situation, and frowned slightly. He just felt that the guy in front of him seemed to have lost his rationality. No longer human? Before Orgrim could figure out what state this bastard was in, Rengar roared again and pounced directly on Orgrim. This time, the speed was so fast that Orgrim didn't even see his movements clearly, he only felt an after-image flash across his eyes. Then, there was a sharp pain in his chest, and his whole body was knocked away by a claw. After landing, Orgrim looked down and saw a few blood marks on his chest, and he could even see his pale ribs exposed. "So fast," Orgrim murmured in shock. On the other side, Shiji also had a smile on his lips, and whispered softly, "Rengar seems to be stronger." At the same time, Orgrim suddenly felt a threat, and his body without hesitation, he raised his body backwards, bent his waist directly, and placed his hands on the ground, assuming the posture of an iron bridge. Sure enough, Rengar's claws, now stained red with blood, pierced through the air where Orgrim's chest had been. Orgrim didn't hesitate. He used his arms and kicked Rengar directly in the chest. Rengar had no intention of retreating at this time, and was kicked in the chest by Orgrim, causing him to take a few steps back. At the same time, Orgrim also turned over and stood on the ground again. He exerted force under his feet, and the figure also crashed into Rengar at an extremely fast speed. Tyrannosaurus charging elbow, Orgrim roared angrily. He hit Rengar's chest with his elbow, and powerful force burst out. He clearly heard the sound of Rengar's ribs breaking. A more powerful shockwave also followed. It came out of his body, but Rengar seemed not to be affected by the injury at all, as if he couldn't feel the pain now. With a sudden claw, he grabbed Orgrim's shoulder, and his sharp nails pierced Orgrim's shoulder. Near Grim's shoulder blade muscles. The next moment, Rengar bit out, and the huge lion's head bit into Orgrim's shoulder. The powerful bite force caused his sharp teeth to pierce Orgrim directly. Grim's shoulder blade, Orgrim also felt this heart-piercing pain. Lost your sense of pain, Orgrim thought in his heart. Although his shoulder blade was pierced by sharp teeth, it did not cause Orgrim to lose control of his arm. He suddenly hugged Rengar's head, biting on his shoulder. Then raised his other hand and repeatedly hit Rengar's back with his elbows. Rengar seemed to feel no pain, and kept waving his claws on Orgrim's body, causing a large area of damage. Blood flower. Dry. Orgrim roared angrily and hit Rengar's neck with his elbow, finally knocking the beast loose from its bite. Then Orgrim didn't give Rengar any chance at all and kneeled him. It hit his lower abdomen and knocked him out. Only then did Orgrim take a look at his injuries. Several holes were punched through his left shoulder and he was bleeding. There were wounds everywhere on his body. The wound torn open by the sharp claw seemed to be stained red with blood. On the other side, Rengar's nose twitched slightly, as if he was stimulated by the strong smell of blood. He roared again and headed towards Orgrim, rushed towards him. His bloody mouth opened from the air, and Rengar seemed to want to bite off Orgrim's head. Orgrim was also angry from his heart, and struck with a straight punch. It was shot out with a shockwave and inserted directly into Rengar's mouth. Ouch, Rengar wailed, and at the same time he closed his mouth sharply, trapping Orgrim's forearm in his mouth. The powerful bite force directly broke Orgrim's arm bone. If there were no muscles attached, he would probably have eaten it. At the same time, Orgrim's other hand also condensed a shockwave, and punched Rengar's head from the right. Two heavy punches, one inside and one outside, hit Rengar's head near the mouth and temple, causing Rengar's mouth to open again. Orgrim pulled out his broken left arm, and then kicked Rengar in the stomach. Kicked him away. Rengar struggled on the ground and seemed to want to get up, but his head was dizzy. After he staggered to his feet, the blood in his eyes gradually disappeared. Before he could regain his consciousness, Orgrim had already exerted force on his feet, rushed over, hit him on the head, and knocked him away. This time, Rengar whimpered a few times as he fell to the ground, but there was no movement. You guys are awesome, the monthly ticket is 499. I knew at a glance that it would definitely be over 500, so I will add more. Thank you all for your support. Come on, continue to ravage me. By the way, there is still about 2,700 left to reward, so that's it. Keep adding more updates. Rich people, don't pity me. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 137. In Shiji's big library, there are many things collected by this guy. Beckman was leaning against a bookcase, sitting cross-legged on the floor very casually, reading something with a book in his hand. Orgrim was also in the library at this time, looking for secret books on physical skills and the like. There was a bandage wrapped around Orgrim's waist, but nothing else changed. It had been 2 days since the battle with Rengar, and his injuries had already healed to some degree. As for Rengar, although he is an animal-type ability user, he is still a little far away from awakening. When his wild nature collapsed, he was seriously injured by Orgrim, and he is still recovering. Rengar is not the strongest person under Shiji. He can only be said to be the strongest among those who are about the same age as Orgrim. In other words, the guy with the strongest opposition to Orgrim. Now that Orgrim had given him a beating, the rest of those who opposed Orgrim no longer had the courage to continue going against him. In the past 2 days, No one has said anything sarcastic. Occasionally, when I meet some of Shiji's junior cotters, they will respectfully call Orgrim Master Hammer. There was no way around it. Normally, Rengar was already arrogant enough, but when facing Orgrim, Lord Hammer didn't even use a hammer and just hammered him to pieces. Without the leader, who would seek out Orgrim's misfortune? Why don't you kneel down and call the boss? Have you found your favorite physical technique? Beckman asked without raising his head while reading the book. Orgrim put a book back in his hand, then smacked his lips and said, tentatively, we will decide on Navy Type 6, but I'm still here. Keep looking. Yeah, Beckman responded very casually, and then asked how did you feel about fighting that Rengar? Ha 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 ha, actually at the beginning, I wanted to see if I could come up with any skills before the battle, but I found that I had no clue at all. What follows, to be honest, that's all. I really don't know how that guy got more than 900 million bounties, Orgrim joked with a smile. Because he is very cruel. He slaughtered an entire naval base without leaving any humans or animals behind, and he also caused several massacres. That guy would often fall into a violent state and kill everyone he saw, so he was very threatening. The Navy offered a bounty for this kind of thing, of course, Neiman told me, Beckman also said with a smile. After a slight pause, Beckman asked again, but it seems that you are not seriously injured. That's because I chose a different method. I used the fastest and most violent method to fight him. Otherwise, I don't know how long it would take. Although that guy doesn't have the ability to awaken, it's almost the same. It's animal type. I hate fighting this kind of guy. The fight between capable guys is on Shiji's territory anyway, so it's very safe. There's no problem in exchanging injuries for injuries and resolving them as quickly as possible. Orgrim responded with a smile. That seems to be the case, Beckman smacked his lips and said. Orgrim didn't respond this time, and was still looking for his favorite books. After a while, Beckman asked again, it's not just because he wants to use the best end the battle quickly, right? You have any thoughts on him? Orgrim laughed when he heard this and said, are you really living in my belly? After a pause, Orgrim continued, don't forget, I am determined to take over Shiji. I can't just take over his resources and not be interested in his subordinates, right? I think Rengar seems to have a lot of potential. So you have to use the most ferocious way, the most brutal means, in the field where he is best at defeating him, and want to convince him, Beckman smiled and joked. Let him realize the gap between us. To be honest, Shiji's subordinates all have one thing in common, Orgrim smiled. Before he spoke, Beckman answered directly, I admire the strong. Gee ha 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 ha, yes, I worship the strong. Orgrim laughed. So you think that if you beat him so badly, he may not hate you, or even, likely to worship you? Beckman asked, touching his chin. That's right. Orgrim nodded and said. It's a really rough idea, Beckman smiled and said. Respecting the strong is Shiji's belief, and for me, I just need to keep getting stronger, and that's enough, Orgrim said as he put back the book about the 8 Chong fist in his hand. Yes, it is the 8 Chong fist of the 8 treasure navy in the Kingdom of Flowers. Many years ago, Shiji worked with the great pirate Wang Ji on the Rocks ship. Wang Ji was a guy from the Kingdom of Flowers. He didn't know where he got the secret of the 8 treasure navy. Later, inexplicably, Shiji got it. I also have a copy. Orgrim was originally very interested in this secret skill. After all, the 8 treasure navy is indeed powerful, and something passed down from generation to generation cannot be fake. But after some research, he discovered that the 8 treasure navy, the punch seems to overlap with his current state. The 8 punches are mainly based on the shockwave as an advantage, and Orgrim doesn't need this at all. But this thing can be regarded as a weapon for Orgrim. It opened his eyes and gave him some guidance on how to develop his abilities. People who practice Botchankan are generally difficult to hurt with swords, and guns and artillery seem to be unable to cause harm to them. The reason for this is because of the impact force absorbed. This seems to have opened up Orgrim's thinking. There are many attacks in this world. In the final analysis, they are the damage caused by impact. If I could absorb these impacts, wouldn't I be immune to most injuries? On the contrary, to repel the impact force evenly from the whole body is to rewrite the Shinra Tensen. I stopped looking and decided to practice the Navy's superhuman physical skills, the 6 styles. Orgrim thought for a while and said in a deep voice. If the Navy knew about this, they would probably be furious. You should learn from them and deal with them, ha ha ha, Beckman said with a smile. Shiji does have the complete 6th form of the Navy in his hands. This thing is very popular in the Navy, and many generals and officers know it. And Shiji has often been against the Navy, so he took that. Let's talk about Rengar. He alone has massacred naval bases. It's reasonable to have such a harvest. Although my physical fitness is strong, my defense is really not that good, and my training in armed color and domineering is not in place. I have good physical skills in the 6 postures that can make up for my shortcomings. At the same time, the life return seems to be very good. To match my physical fitness, in the future, they may not be weaker than those with awakened abilities of the animal system. Orgrim smacked his lips and said. Most of your attacks are rampant. Although they are powerful, they are very weak in other aspects. Embarrassing. There are many things in the 6th Marine style that can just make up for your shortcomings and prevent you from looking so big, Beckman also said with a smile. Oh? Do you understand it well? Have you seen this? Orgrim asked curiously. Of course, I spend much more time in this library than you do. Beckman waved his hand and said. Ha 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 ha, is there anything gained? Orgrim asked with a smile. Unlike you, I am reorganizing my system. The harvest is great. The things here in Shiji are simply extremely rich. If you throw out a book casually, people outside will probably grab it. However, I have not fully absorbed these harvests, Beckman said confidently. Orgrim nodded with a smile, and then walked towards Beckman, but after taking a few steps, he paused. Then he turned to look at the bookshelf beside him and stretched out his hand. Take down a book from above. I almost forgot about this, Orgrim whispered softly. What he was holding in his hand was the famous Devil Fruit illustrated book. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 138. The Devil Fruit illustrated book is a very rare thing, and many people will never see it in their lifetime. And here in Shiji, there is a relatively complete illustrated book of devil fruits. Why it is said to be relatively complete is because not all devil fruits are recorded in the illustrated book. The devil fruit illustrations in the hands of various forces are also very different. Theoretically speaking, the world government should be the one who has the most complete grasp of the devil fruit Pokédex. Of course, what Shiji has in hand is not bad. After all, he is the leader of the pirates. Opening the Devil Fruit illustrated book at random, Orgrim started searching on it. Most of the fruits inside were gaudy, and Orgrim even saw a graphic introduction to the rubber fruits, and couldn't help but smile. After flipping through a few pages, Orgrim finally found what he wanted to see. He now has 2 devil fruits in his hand. One is the transparent fruit snatched from the guy from Moria. It is superhuman. There is nothing to say. No one is willing to eat this thing for the time being. The second one was snatched from other pirates on Gaia Island. Until now, he had not figured out what kind of devil fruit it was. This time, Orgrim finally found the illustration. After Orgrim glanced at it twice, his expression looked a little strange. Beckman on the other side glanced at Orgrim curiously and asked, "What are you looking at?" "Devil Fruit illustrated book." Orgrim responded softly. "Ah, speaking of which, I have been busy thinking of ways to improve my strength recently, and I almost forgot about this thing. Have you found it? Our unknown devil fruit? Beckman asked with a smile. It's animal-based. Orgrim nodded and responded. What ability? Beckman asked curiously. Orgrim said with a strange expression, animal-type catfruit leopard form. Beckman nodded naturally. It was not something particularly rare. After all, this was not a natural type, nor a special superhuman type, nor a fantasy beast species. It's a very common fruit. Why are you surprised? Beckman asked with some confusion. Orgrim came back to his senses a little, and then said with a smile, it's nothing, I'm just a little disappointed. I thought it was some powerful devil fruit, but in the end it was an animal type. Not greedy enough? Beckman smiled, and then said, it's not bad, right? The carnivorous devil fruit abilities of the animal type are very strong, and in the leopard form, I don't think it's weaker than Rengar's lion form. If someone eats it in the future and cultivates it well, it won't be weak either. Yes, not weak either, Orgrim murmured. It's not weak, it can even be said to be very strong. It has animal type, cat fruit, and leopard form. But this thing shouldn't be in the hands of the world government and then be taken over by that little genius Rob Lucci. Did you eat it? Why did it come into your own hands? Could it be that even if you didn't deal with the pirate on Gaia Island, they would have been killed by the world government? Harvest a devil fruit? Just throw this thought away, anyway. In fact, this thing is in my hands now. I have to say that this devil fruit in leopard form is indeed very good, but it is just good. But some things are naturally suitable for some people, such as this devil fruit in the form of a leopard is his destiny for Lucci. In fact, with Lucci's talent and the blessing of the cat fruit, Lucci's strength indeed reached the level of a general in the end. As for whether he is as strong as a general, it is hard to say, but even if he is worse, it is not much different. The key is that Lucci was still young at that time. His future is limitless. See it in Orgrim come on. Although Lucci was considered to be the strongest CP-9 organization in the past 800 years when he was a child, that should refer to his talent. In terms of strength, he also tried his best in the battle on Judiciary Island, but there is still an insurmountable gap between the top big shots. 2 years after that battle, Lucci officially stepped onto the stage of the world's strongest, which should not be underestimated. Orgrim estimates that the factors behind this there are 2 aspects. On the one hand, Lucci's talent is undeniable. On the other hand, he has gained a lot from the battle on Judiciary Island, right? In addition, he was promoted to CP-0 and gained better training or something. Therefore, it can be inferred that Lucci was actually buried during CP-9. Although his talent was strong, he was limited by complicated tasks, and he often went undercover for several years. There is no time to hone one's strength. The next 2 years will be the explosive period of accumulation, and the strength will fly upwards like a rocket. Overall, Lucci is a very rare talent. As for that kid, he probably hasn't joined the world government yet. The cat fruit in my hands, does it mean my fate with him? But in the vast sea, how can I find him? Orgrim rubbed his chin and murmured. After thinking for a while, Orgrim barely had an idea. There is no doubt that Lucci is an orphan. He was sold to the world government and joined the CP organization where he was trained since childhood. Then, maybe we can start from this aspect and try to see if we can cut off the hook in advance. Church, Orgrim whispered softly. But these are things for later. Orgrim doesn't have time to waste on this now. Let's talk about it later. Moreover, this matter also depends on fate. Let's arrange it for Plank and let him try it out. After gathering these thoughts, Orgrim opened the Devil Fruit illustrated book again. After searching for a few pages, he saw something that he was also very interested in. The so-called invincible natural system, Thunder Fruit. Orgrim said with a smile on his lips. The thunder fruit has been lost on the sea for many years. Orgrim is very sure that this thing is on the Sky Island, in the place called Bika. That is the hometown of Anaru. When he was on Gaia Island, Orgrim wanted to go to Sky Island, but before he could, the soaring sea current had passed. He could not wait there for a year. And it was also very dangerous. But now that he has joined Shiji's banner, it is not so dangerous to go to Sky Island. However, how to arrange this matter requires long-term planning. As for urgency, Orgrim is not in a hurry. The thunder fruit is right there, and you can't run away. As for whether it will be eaten by Enelu or something. In fact, for Orgrim, this is nothing, since he himself cannot eat the thunder fruit. Then in the future, we must find an owner for the thunder fruit. As for this candidate, Orgrim had no idea at all, and he had nothing suitable in his hands. As for Enelu, there is nothing wrong with it, it's just that his knowledge is limited to an empty island, which makes him blind and arrogant. If the thunder fruit was really eaten by Enelu, then Orgrim would probably take Enelu away and be done with it. If you train him well in the future, he may not be inferior to any admiral in the navy. The most urgent thing is to calm down and improve your strength. Let's start with the sixth form of the navy, Orgrim finally thought. As for the empty island and so on, let's put it aside for now. Orgrim has done all the things that should be done, so he doesn't plan to stay in the library anymore. After reading, looking at Beckman, who was still sitting there, Orgrim asked, "Do you want to continue?" "Well, don't worry about me, you can go about your business," Beckman nodded and said. "Good." Orgrim didn't show any pretense. He took the books about Navy 6 and turned around and left the library. When he heard the door closing, Beckman raised his head and glanced over there, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Smile, then lowered his head and immersed himself in his own world. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 139. In the courtyard of Orgrim, it was the last moment before darkness broke. Orgrim is sitting quietly on the grass, the power of darkness in his body is constantly surging. At this moment, he has reached his strongest state. When the sun rose and the first ray of sunlight broke through the sky, Orgrim felt a suppressive power. Then, his originally surging dark power quickly began to subside. When the sun appeared, his power completely declined and he fell into a slightly weak state. Still have some bad control, Orgrim opened his eyes and whispered softly. In the past few days, he could be said to have forgotten all about sleep and food. During the day, he practiced haki, the sixth form of the navy, and other such things. At night, I kept thinking about his dark power. Orgrim is still not very good at controlling the golden finger of the power of darkness. In other words, he has his own ideas. Originally, the explosion of the power of darkness was gradual, and his power would reach its strongest before dawn. But in the past few days, Orgrim wanted to try to see if he could speed up this process. It's best to directly enter the stage of double strength, instead of taking it step by step. After a few days of research, he made some progress and seemed to be able to control the progress. But it's still not enough to directly accelerate to a double state. But this has already opened up a new opportunity for him. Next, he will continue to grind every day and gradually gain complete control. In the future, he should be able to reach a point where Orgrim is satisfied. Before coming to Shiji, Orgrim had also thought about the power of darkness. But after all, he didn't dare to be too presumptuous. Because this kind of power will make him fall into a period of weakness after using it. Although the time will not be long, who can say for sure in the sea? What if at this weak stage, I met some big boss at sea and had some conflict? That is simply cutting off an arm. Therefore, before coming here, Orgrim did not dare to study this power too much. It's different now. Shiki is in charge here, and Orgrim can be as arrogant as he likes. Even if some big boss comes, Shiji will be there to support him, and he, Orgrim, can take advantage of him. I have to say, it feels great to be protected by a big boss. Yawning a little, Orgrim moved his arms, rubbed his eyes again, smacked his lips and said, I haven't slept in the past few days. It's all thanks to my physical fitness. I must have a good rest tonight, let's combine. As he said this, Orgrim prepared to stand up. At this moment, Niemann and Sphinx walked in. After seeing Orgrim's figure, Niemann had a successful smile on his face. Brother! Niemann called softly. Orgrim turned to look at them, his expression a little surprised and strange, and asked, It's just dawn, why are you two here? A slightly evil smile appeared on Niemann's lips. She did not answer Orgrim's question. Instead, she asked, Brother, I heard from Brother Beckman that you haven't slept in the past few days. Are you still studying your dark power? Orgrim only thought Niemann was caring about her, nodded with a smile and said, Yes, that's true. Then you must be very sleepy now, right? And I heard from Brother Beckman that after you use that power of night, you will fall into weakness when day comes. Niemann blinked and asked curiously. Orgrim didn't intend to hide it from them. This kind of thing cannot be hidden, and it's best not to hide it from your own people, lest if something goes wrong, you might miscalculate the power and cause the consequences. It was a mistake in judgment or something. So Orgrim smiled and nodded and said, That's it. I'm sleepy and tired now, and I've just fallen into a weak stage. I guess I won't be able to recover until noon. I must have a good sleep at night. A flash of light flashed in Niemann's eyes, and then she said, Sure enough, now is your weakest time. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, Yes, what's wrong? Hey, I finally got caught. Niemann smiled evilly, and then compared her arms, showing her strong muscles, and said, Brother, I want to challenge you. Let's arm wrestle to see who is stronger. Then she didn't wait any longer. A confused Orgrim spoke, and Niemann continued, I have already challenged Brother Beckman and Mr. Mihawk, and they all lost to me. Now it's up to you, brother. Orgrim was shocked at this time. He looked at Niemann and asked, What? It's normal for Beckman to lose to you in terms of strength. Mihawk also lost? Is it because you found his weak point like you did with me? For example, he just finished sparring with Boss Shiji or something. Niemann looked unhappy when she heard this, pouting her little mouth. Although her expression was very cute, her figure and overall appearance made her look very weird. The Sphinx on the other side laughed. Ha, it's not what you think. Although Niemann's strength is not the most outstanding among our flying pirates, her strength is very outstanding. She is a superhuman type and a muscle fruit user. Everyone was full of praise for her strength. She defeated Mihawk by arm wrestling in a fair and upright contest, the Sphinx said proudly. This really surprised Orgrim. Beckman is really nothing outstanding in terms of strength. His poison fruit ability is very powerful, but there is no excessive bonus in terms of strength. My physical fitness is not particularly abnormal. Due to Orgrim, he is now paying more attention to the growth of wisdom. Therefore, Niemann, the King Kong Barbie, can beat him in arm wrestling, and Orgrim is not at all. Not surprised. But Mihawk is different. Mihawk's strength is definitely not weak. He is a swordsman. Normally, swordsmen are very powerful, otherwise they will not be able to wield desperate slashes. Although Mihawk has not yet reached the level of the number 1 swordsman, but his strength is enough to cut off giant ships with ease. Niemann actually defeated him in terms of strength openly. It seems that he still underestimated Superman. Is it a muscle fruit? At this moment, Niemann also said, They all say that in terms of strength, brother, you are the real pervert, so I will specially choose a time when you are at your weakest to challenge you. In this case, I can win 3 kills in a row, a grand slam, ha 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 ha. Gee ha 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 ha, you little girl, do you still want to sneak attack me? Come and give it a try. Although your brother and I are indeed weak now, my strength is not that simple, Orgrim laughed and said. Although Niemann is suspected of sneak attack, Orgrim, as the eldest brother, doesn't really care about anything. As for his sister, it doesn't hurt to let her have some. Then Orgrim Grim and the excited Niemann came to a stone pier, and the Sphinx stood between them as the referee. Prepare, the Sphinx waved her hand and said. Niemann and Orgrim stretched out their arms together, and then the two held their hands together. Orgrim felt the thick palm and smacked his lips involuntarily. Alas, the cute little loli who followed behind her back then has finally turned into a King Kong who is not inferior to herself. Are you ready? The Sphinx asked with a raised eyebrow. Okay, Niemann said enthusiastically. Orgrim also smiled and nodded. Good, start, the Sphinx said in a deep voice. As soon as she finished speaking, Orgrim felt a huge force coming from his arm. If he didn't notice, he was almost thrown away by this force. His reaction was very quickly, a burst of brute force also burst out from his hand, and he stopped the force. At the same time, he pulled back a little, and reached a stalemate with Niemann. What a strong force, Orgrim thought with some surprise in his heart. Although he didn't go out with all his strength at this time, he was still in a hurry, but even so, he couldn't suppress Shang Niemann. Drink! Niemann shouted loudly, and her arm instantly expanded twice. The strong muscles shone in the sun, like metal. With this force, she once again pushed Orgrim's arm into the air. The side was suppressed. Damn it, Orgrim was stunned at this time, feeling a steady stream of huge force coming from his arm, constantly suppressing him. He also began to unleash all his strength, slowly leveling the situation, but that was all. At this time, Orgrim was in a weak stage, and he had no intention of using any forced explosive power to bully Niemann. Just when the situation was even, Orgrim noticed a flash of light in Niemann's eyes. Muscle explosion King Kong! Niemann shouted in a low voice. As soon as she finished speaking, her arms, which were already strong enough, seemed to flash with a dazzling light. Before Orgrim could react, he felt that his arms were instantly he was suppressed, and then his feet staggered. The whole person was lifted up by this strong pressure. The person flipped 360 degrees in the air, and then sat down on the grass. The whole person was stunned. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 140. Ah ha 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 ha, this is my big victory. After Niemann killed Orgrim, she jumped up and shouted excitedly. Sphinx was also very happy and said, that's awesome, Niemann, I think you should be able to get a reward of 1 billion. That's right. Orgrim came back to his senses a little at this time, looked at his arms, and then at the strong Niemann. His expression gradually changed from surprise to a bitter smile. Should I say that he underestimated Niemann? The power that I was so proud of was defeated by this little girl. I saw Niemann with her waist inserted, looking at Orgrim with a very disgusting look and said, huh, brother, are you convinced? Orgrim smiled, waved his hand and said, I'm convinced, Niemann, you are really awesome. After being praised by Orgrim, Niemann was a little embarrassed and said, I also know it's a trick. You should be more powerful, brother. Ha 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 ha, Orgrim smiled and said nothing. There's nothing to say about this. It's just that Ni man took advantage of her and won her in an arm wrestling match. It doesn't mean anything. As for the size of this power, it can only be said that Niemann is indeed very abnormal. However, Orgrim was confident that if there was a serious competition, he would not lose to Niemann so easily. This is just a game, nothing serious. Speaking of which, I haven't even cared about your abilities. How is the development going? Orgrim asked with a smile. Niemann heard this and said very confidently, I am very powerful. The latest bounty is 92 million Baileys. Then without waiting for Orgrim to speak, Niemann showed her muscles and continued, my muscles are very powerful, look. Niemann said as she activated her abilities. The muscles on her body surged, and then straightened up again, looking as hard as steel. Orgrim couldn't help but nodded, and was about to say something. What? Niemann continued, the Sphinx. Learn. The Sphinx smiled and took off the revolver hanging from her waist. This runaway loli always carries a lot of firearms on her body, a Gatling gun on her back, and 2 more on her waist. A handgun and a revolver. Orgrim really wanted to call her the king of firepower. In Orgrim's somewhat surprised gaze, the Sphinx pointed the revolver at Niemann's face. He shot out the chest without hesitation. This shocked Orgrim. But soon, he discovered something was wrong. He saw the bullet bounce on Niemann's chest, and then directly bang flew out. But there was no injury at all on Niemann's chest. There was not even a red mark, as if nothing happened just now. Muscles of steel, this is an ability I developed, which can instantly make muscles as hard as steel. The defense is very strong, and ordinary cannonballs cannot hurt me at all. Niemann said with a very proud expression. 6 styles. Orgrim raised his eyebrows and asked. Niemann was stunned for a moment when he heard this, and then said with some surprise, awesome, brother, you can see it at a glance, I did develop this ability based on the Navy's 6 styles. Orgrim didn't pay attention to Niemann's casual calling of himself brother and eldest brother. Instead, he smiled and said, yes, I have also been practicing the 6 postures recently. As for power, I understand it somewhat. This should be the principle of iron blocks, right? Yes or no, the iron block of the Marine 6th form cannot have any other movements after being used. It can only be said to be a living target. But I am different. My steel muscles can allow me to move freely and at the same time have extremely strong defense. I am constantly normalizing this ability. I believe that before long, I will turn this power into instinct in my daily life. Niemann nodded and said. Orgrim nodded after hearing this. If Niemann can really use this power as a normal state, it will be equivalent to having an extra passive skill, which is extremely powerful. As for the 6th Marine style, the iron block inside, as Niemann said, is relatively sluggish. Except for the werewolf Gabra in the future, no one can use the iron block and move freely at the same time. And even Gabra can't normalize the iron block. And it is obvious that the iron block has an upper limit, and the development of abilities varies from person to person. Niemann is a person with great potential in this area. The upper limit is it will definitely be much higher than the iron block. In the future, the passive defense power alone may be very unsolvable. With this kind of power of mine, coupled with the armed domineering power, few people can really hurt me, and if I am injured, when Niemann said this, she took out a small knife from her waist, scratched her arm, and cut a small bloody mouth. Muscles closed. Niemann shouted. The muscles at the wound were instantly closed together. If it weren't for the blood around it, you wouldn't even be able to tell that there was a cut there. I can forcefully close the wound in a very short period of time to stop bleeding. Next, I plan to continue to develop this power. If I can achieve a state of self-healing of muscles in the future, it will be even more powerful. Niemann said excitedly. Orgrim was really surprised at this time. The muscle fruit, he didn't pay much attention to it before, but now, he seems to have discovered the shining point of this fruit. The power of this fruit is not as gaudy as other superhuman powers. Its real power seems to lie in its direct effect on its own muscles, which are an important part of the human body and occupy most of the body. If it can really be developed to the extreme, it's scary to think about. Before Orgrim could recover from the surprise, Niemann grabbed one of his arms and then used force to remove it. Became dislocated. If I suffer a serious injury during a battle, such as a broken or dislocated bone, I can also use muscles to temporarily replace the bones. As Neiman spoke, the muscles in her arm also tensed up. Then the arm was clearly dislocated, but she was still able to use her strong muscle strength to move her arm, and it didn't look like it was dislocated at all. State, even very powerful. If it's just a dislocation, when Neiman said this, she exerted strength in her arms, and her muscles surged, only to hear a soft click. Neiman's arm was dislocated and repaired by muscles. It can be restored instantly. Neiman said proudly. Really awesome, Orgrim said very seriously. Right? Hey, Neiman smiled sheepishly. Not only that, Neiman can also enter a powerful burst period in an instant. Her physical fitness has been greatly improved, and her strength is so amazing that she can lift a huge battleship with one hand without any effort. With this kind of power, the final a powerful blow, armed with domineering aura, even Mr. Shiji would be knocked away, Sphinx boasted to Orgrim from the side. It was as if the power was her own. Orgrim was indeed surprised when he heard this. A power that would even knock Shiji away? This is not to be underestimated. However, Neiman's expression was a little embarrassed and she said it can indeed be done, but only for a moment. If I am now, I can only maintain this state for about a minute at most. Sphinx also felt a little regretful after hearing this. He nodded, and then said yes, beyond this time limit, Neiman's muscles will quickly collapse and dissolve, she will fall into a very weak state in a very short period of time, far worse than your weakness. It can be said that at that time, Neiman was powerless to fight back. Myolysis, Orgrim murmured in his heart. In his previous life, he had also heard of this complicated condition. Many people's fitness intensity exceeded their tolerance, which would cause myolysis. The striated muscles could not withstand the pressure and dissolved, and eventually even can cause death from kidney failure. But I believe that I will be able to overcome these problems in the future. I am determined to become a master of physical arts. Neiman said with a very confident smile. It feels a bit like the animal type, but if your ability is truly developed to a deep level, it should be more powerful than the average animal type. I'm looking forward to it, Neiman. Orgrim said with a smile. Don't worry, brother, I will definitely become your right-hand man in the future. Neiman said very confidently.